Magandang umaga. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles, dating kalihim ng press ng Marcos administration.
Magandang umaga. I'm Atty. Gutierrez, the spokesperson of former VP Leni Robredo.
And we are the spokes. From the Palace Halls and the OVP then to our group chats now.
We'll give you perspectives from an insider's position standing behind the podium.
According to, noted by the spokes today, according to DILG Secretary John Vic Lemulia, criminal charges may be filed against 10 to 11 members of the Ateneo coaching staff for the deaths of Baterbonia and Adili.
Okay, napag-usapan na natin to before. And
Yeah.
Na-anticipate talaga natin there were a number of possible criminal
Reckless
cases.
imprudence. Pero ito
case.
homicide, not reckless imprudence ang fina-file nila.
Homicide?
Ang possible.
As in, intentional?
Hindi, wala naman intent pag ano. Di ba, pag murder, saka may intent. Pero, you have a dead body, homicide.
Yung anti-hazing talaga is...
They hit all the,
Yeah.
they hit everything sa anti-hazing, even without, normally fraternity yan eh.
Yeah. Pero wala na kasing
here,
distinction eh.
oo.
Basta any
Wala,
organization. And
plus,
naalala mo nung pinag-usapan nga natin yung mga violations of CHED guidelines. Pwede kasing pumasok yon as violations of the anti-hazing law. Yung failure to actually comply with mga requirements for school activities.
it's annus horribilis for the Ateneo, no?
Yeah.
It's tragedy on tragedy for me. But of course, parang malabo. What bothers me is that the initial findings ng PNP is accidental.
Yeah.
And now, parang I wonder if nadadala ng media outrage yung pag-file ng homicide. This homicide. Malayo siya sa reckless imprudence.
Yeah, totoo naman yan.
So, pero
kasi,
depends on the evidence in the
yun naman kasing accident, hindi naman siya incompatible with the finding of negligence or reckless imprudence. Pero to say na talagang homicide,
no?
parang medyo ibang level yon.
Yeah.
Tsaka 10 to 11, medyo madami yun.
Sila,
Ang dami nun.
Pero even the story about what happened, hindi pa rin maliwanag.
Yeah.
Even when the students, yung ibang mga teammates nung deceased, nagpapa-interview na sila. So, ang isa pang nagiging concern, syempre, yung trauma, yung survivor's guilt.
Oo naman.
Ng mga
And I can only imagine gaano ka traumatic na experience na yun, kasama mo.
Oh, what if you're standing in the water, katabi mo, wow. Di ba, parang napaka-random.
Yeah.
So, it's, like I said, it's tragedy on tragedy. Tapos, they've lost most of their coaching staff na by now.
Well, hopefully, beyond yung accountability for the specific people involved in this case, magkaroon talaga ng institutional changes diba? To prevent yung ganyang
It seems like also yung ibang mga students, parang ang feeling nila that their own administration, the Ateneo administration, has not been as responsive as they ought to have been or what they expected.
I think talaga there was a huge amount of disappointment, lalo na nung simula. Yung
nung
walang
tahimik
lumalabas.
sila,
And then
sobrang
the way
tahimik,
na parang hindi masyadong naasikaso yung pamilya.
We don't also want kasi na yung nagiging extremes o ditahimik ang Ateneo, then a lot of assumptions are being made. So, as we say, di ba, justice is always somewhere in between those two. Hindi rin natin gusto na any side becomes a victim of the outrage rather than a just decision made based on evidence.
Yeah.
So, but we sympathize with the whole Ateneo community, the parents.
Yeah. Obviously. Tsaka, si Rene Baterbonia, alam ko, was already laid to rest yesterday. So, I hope that, he rests in peace and his family finds some comfort. Diba? Although, I can imagine, sobrang hirap pa rin
Might
talaga.
take a while. And we should all understand why that will be so.
Yeah. Also noted by the spokes, another incident of school violence happened in Negros Occidental as a grade 9 student was stabbed by a fellow student.
Saan ba to? Inside the school or in front of the school?
Hindi ko alam yung
Kasi
detalye.
outside the school na. Ano yung ruling dyan? Remember, pagka it's within, like nasa labas ng gate, meron pa rin in loco parentis yung school. Which means that the school, even if the children are on their way to school, di ba? Merong Supreme Court decisions that indicate that there is some responsibility on the part of the school. So, for cases like this that happen in the school, merong liability or responsibility yung mga schools for the safety and the actions of their own students. Pero another consideration also is, di ba dito, nagsumbong yung victim?
Yes.
Nagsabi siya that there were threats. He or she, di ata maliwanag din. He felt unsafe. Na he felt that there was a threat. And the teacher, in fairness to the teacher, reacted, told the victim, wag ka munang aalis, pero umalis pa rin siya.
Pero ako, yun nga yung tingin kong bigger issue na na-expose dito eh. Hindi ko alam if our schools are actually equipped to provide yung necessary psychological support para sa mga ganitong klaseng instances.
Especially for preventive measures.
Exactly.
Lalo na dito, nakikita nila may threat na.
Oo nga.
But did they do enough? That will also be a question of the parents. Did the teacher or the school authorities do enough, and did they do it on time?
Yeah.
Diba? So now, dati walang ganito. I mean, may naririnig tayo. There's bullying yan. May batas tuloy tayo because of that. And sometimes the bullying becomes extreme. So in the US, because of the recent shooting then, the shooting incident, in the US, alam natin that most of the shooting incidents in schools is a confluence of causes, no? Bullying is one of the main factors. Access to firearms.
Isolation.
Feelings of isolation, walang psychological intervention. Yung kultura din kasi in the US, napansin niyo, pagka may bullying, ano yung responses ng authorities? Deal with it.
Yeah.
Dito sa Pilipinas, we don't do that. Or at least dun sa schools that my kids went. They take this very, very seriously. I don't know if it's the same in public schools. Pero para sa akin, kung hindi pa, maybe it's time that they start taking these things very seriously.
Kasi ultimately, tingin ko, yung prevention dyan starts with, at that point. Yung hindi pa yung umaabot sa stage where violence is already yung outcome.
Tsaka because of media, di ba? There's some instances kasi kaka-consume natin ng mga movies abroad, yung values. For example, you will see instances that are portrayed in popular media na pag may binubully, the victim is left to their own devices. So, sana dito there will always be somebody to watch out for things like this.
Okay. These are the headlines noted by the spokes today. Up next, the overview and key findings of the Reuters Institute 2026 Digital News Report when the spokes return after the short break.
And the spokes is back. The Reuters Institute Digital News Report 2026 has just been released. Its findings are stark. Trust in the news is falling. Media is now overtaken by news websites.
The question is no longer who reports the news, but who shapes what we believe. Joining our discussion is journalism professor from the UP College of Mass Communications, Dr. Rachel Khan. Welcome to the spokes, Dr.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Khan. Why do you think the Reuters report is of such importance?
It tells us where the people are getting their information. And so it gives us an overview, a worldwide actually overview of the information order and also conversely the disorder. That's also a consequence of if people are not getting news from official sources. It tells us where they're getting it from, how trustworthy is that, and whether their trust is misplaced.
So this study was conducted in 48 countries, is that correct?
Yes.
Ano yung mga countries na ito? Can you give us a general idea?
Of course, the primary first world countries, the US, Canada, also in Asia, Korea, Japan, most of Europe, and then you have in Asia, basically the ASEAN is there, and some countries in Africa and Latin America. So it's not complete because not all countries in Latin America and Africa were covered, but the big ones like Kenya, they're there.
Pero Philippines is part of the study,
Philippines
right?
is part of the study because it's part of Southeast Asia. Yeah, so most of the countries in the ASEAN were covered.
Why do you think Filipinos should be paying attention to this report?
I think considering that for example, in the 2025 digital report, from the Philippines, it was reported that Filipinos, their main concern was the rise of disinformation. So there was an awareness of that problem. And yet, we see in the 2026 report that we have the lowest trust in our own news. So it begs to the question of, so if they think this information is a problem but they're not getting it for official sources, where are they getting the news, and aren't they opening themselves precisely to the disinformation that they fear? Right? So that's why it's important also even for us in media to see, okay, why is there, what is it that makes people trust us less, and what can we do to address it?
54% of people access news through social media and video platforms compared to 51% through news websites and apps. Do you think this is a problem?
This is a problem if they're not getting their news from, for example, all media now have an online version, right? So if they get it from there, then there's no problem because they're still getting it from official sources. What for me is more worrisome is the 51% that does not look at news at all. Like there's a worldwide and even in the Philippines, a big portion when they were asked, do you read the news, and they said most on the daily basis, no. They don't even access the news.
Did they provide an explanation kung bakit ayaw na nilang manood o magbasa ng
Hindi
news?
kasi it's a survey, so those qualitative questions were not asked.
Okay.
But when you have, for example, the two statistics that you put together, the 28% level of trust in the news, and then you have a 51% that does not even read the news, that is worrisome, right? And then those that access the news, access it. It's worrisome because, like in the majority, the findings show that they access the news based on what is on their Google feed.
Okay.
So it's not
algorithm driven?
It's based. It's algorithm based.
Okay.
Which means that, and what is in the Google News, what is in the normal feeds of like Apple News, Google News, it's what is most popular. Therefore, not what is most important.
I see.
Normally, what is more popular is the ones that deal with the entertainment world, right? So, yun yung, when they talk about news, what they actually see is the entertainment news first before,
current
events and, very important things that we should know about politics and economy, and that becomes secondary. So that's why it's worrisome.
What do you think would be the implications of yung ganitong shift away from consuming official news sources towards going more towards, well, yung hindi traditional news?
Right.
Social media-based information
Social
providers.
media-based, which is why I think it's also important that the media enters into social media, at least through the clips, the short feeds, reels, they can get people interested in the news. And if they're curious enough, they might go to the longer version where there's an actual explanation. So I think the effort of many media institutions to do TikToks and to do Facebook Reels is important. I think they should pursue that because it's not anymore only the Gen Z that's there looking at that. Even the older generation has now gone into short form news. And, and then basically they get it news when they're doom scrolling.
Yes.
Right? So,
Ouch.
ouch talaga. So, the thing is to be able to enter into their algorithms, that kind of platform has to be expanded by the media institutions.
So most people now, there's a lot of people now who rely on their news, you're right, in short form. And mostly videos across all platforms. Do you think that it will be significant also? I mean, people are shifting from reading the news to watching short form videos of the news.
It's very worrisome because when you shift to short form or even just videos, even longer form, it also diminishes the critical thinking of people. So the tendency of our brain, if it's video, is to accept it 100%. While when we are reading, there's still, there's still abstract thinking. So you're actually activating your brain neurons to be more critical and to be critical in the right sense. But here, you can be critical but not without content. So that's the danger of just the very dependent on short form video. And then we know that video can lie, right? Especially now with AI. So it becomes also worrisome that people take it as if this was happening, when by editing or by AI, you could actually change the content. And if they start believing in individual content creators who don't have ethics, we are in trouble, right? So the disinformation problem will rise.
Can you explain that a bit more? What's the difference between getting your news from an official source, a news organization, and a content creator?
When you get it from an official source, you're not just getting it from the one person. The reporter has to, it's vetted, right? You have an editorial board, you have even your peers in the coverage. So you can't really invent the news. I mean, it's so against your own industry, against your own profession, right? While a content creator does not answer to anyone. So whether it's partly fiction or total fiction, unless somebody goes after them and say this is libelous or this is fake, they can get away with it.
But what about, sometimes the internet does its thing. Somebody says something, content creators get called out also. Especially with the higher awareness about misinformation, disinformation, or you say something outright wrong, sometimes you'll get a horde of people calling you out, saying this is not true. For example, recently a lawyer said that Rizal was, remember this? Rizal supposedly was penalized for being part of the Katipunan, for founding the Katipunan, sorry. But he founded actually La Liga Filipina. So that lawyer got called out. So, but don't you think that there's also some kind of corrective measure? And aren't we generalizing content creators?
It's true. No, there are some content creators that are very good. No, I'm not dismissing that.
Yes.
However, the discernment of the public is the one that I question. What makes them sure that they have the correct discernment of where they're getting their news? So you don't have now the guarantee of a whole, established network that tries to make sure that they're reporting the correct thing, right? So you're on your own. As a media user, then I become my own judge without knowing, how this news was produced or gathered. Diba? I make my own judgment, and that's not always the most accurate or best way of making the judgment, unless you also go through a whole fact-checking process. Since I also run check.ph, it takes for us to debunk any disinformation. It takes us half a day at least because we do the research behind it. Where did they get this from, and all that. So if you're not going in to do that, how do you know that your source is verified when they don't have anything backing them up?
Pero one of the things I noticed in the survey is that there's a fairly high level of belief across various countries that the news that news organizations come up with is influenced by who owns the news corporation, by politicians, and so on. So are you saying that even despite these admitted pressures and influences over news organizations, which ultimately are businesses, why should we still put them on a somewhat higher level in terms of credibility than your ordinary content producer?
I think because of the way news is structured, that there's still a level of credibility. But yes, there are certain, perhaps, in a way, you also have to, as a media user, you also have to be aware of who the media owners are, so that you know where the biases could lie. It becomes very tricky, and I won't say that the established media is also 100%, accurate. No, but we make mistakes, or sometimes there is that interplay of media owner influence. But there are still ways of establishing credibility. There are more, in a way, protective measures to establish accuracy and the importance of coverage. No, I mean, you don't, as a reporter, when I was a reporter, I don't spend 14 hours covering Congress just to fuck it up. Sorry, just to make it.
Thank you for your candor.
At the end of the day, right? I mean, I try to. And I think most of my colleagues would try to get it right as much as possible, get the correct sources.
And yet there is a rising mistrust of
mainstream media. Mistrust
precisely because of what Attorney Barry said.
True, and I think also because of a few bad eggs that give us a bad name, right? The lack of stewardship also of a few of our colleagues, unfortunately, affect the rest.
Right now, we have, this is an age where podcasters, content creators are sometimes drawing in audiences larger than most media companies.
And Joe Rogan.
We're talking to two of them. I wish. Right. Okay, so there's Joe Rogan, Steve Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO. They have massive followings that have challenged already established media, and they are trusted. So is this a threat to journalism now as well?
Well, the reason they're trusted is because precisely they've established their credibility through past connections with media, right? And so that credibility has been earned. And in those cases, I would say that people already know where they're coming from, and therefore they have gained our trust. But even having said that, we also see that each person, I think it's okay to, for me to trust podcasters, but at the same time, you also know their own biases, and that awareness helps us also discern when they're also giving us their own opinion, and whether we want to agree with it or not. See, but then it becomes mostly opinion that we either share or don't. That's when it becomes dangerous, because we're not talking about facts anymore. We're talking about facts mixed with opinion.
But aren't major news organizations also opinion-based when they choose the news? What stories they run, which angles they choose? People will already see this as a sort of opinion, regardless of how factually based the reports are? And doesn't this contribute to the mistrust?
I think it in a way it does, but in a sense, we also know that media is limited. But if they stick to, if the basic choices of news remain because what is significant to the majority of the population, the basic news values that we have also practiced, I think that's the most important way of determining if it's trustworthy or not. But if, even sometimes when I see like it's all opinion that's being put out as news, then that will also lead to the mistrust of the news organizations. If the news that they produce is only he said, she said, without the context, without looking at may factual basis ba tong opinion na to. If we start also as media practitioners depending too much on the surface and not looking below, we're also, in a way, we're contributing to that mistrust.
Do you think that the attacks by prominent personalities, politicians in particular, and I suppose Donald Trump is one of the most prominent examples of this, calling out the media, essentially questioning its credibility, calling it biased. Do you think that has had an impact on this drop in trust?
That is precisely their aim, to disenfranchise media by increasing the mistrust, by calling them out even on things that actually they're being factual because they're reporting, for example, controversies, they're reporting corruption and all of that. So what you do, because you're affected by let's say, a report on corruption, you try to make them, lose their credibility because it would hurt you if they could actually prove the evidence against you, right? So it is to the advantage, I think, of a politician to contribute to the mistrust of media, unfortunately. At the same time, they need media to popularize themselves. So it's kind of, it's a weird relationship, actually.
Fair. That sounds fair. But have you noticed, like in the Reuters report, they say only 45% of people are very or extremely interested in the news, down from 63% in 2017, while 42% actively avoid. Wow.
That's almost half. That's almost
exactly.
Why do you think this is so?
Maybe because the news is depressing.
Okay.
And
Fair,
so,
yes.
I won't disagree with that.
I cannot disagree with that.
So, you already have enough problems with your life. So,
So you don't
why
really
add to it, right? So, unless the news actually affects you.
Could it be also news fatigue?
News fatigue of hearing the same things and getting no resolution. Reports about corruption. And then not getting to the
no resolution
or anybody being penalized or, diba?
Yeah.
So that impunity is also very tiring.
Yeah. So major factor, has the algorithm become the new editor? But before you answer that, the spokes will return after this short break.
The Spokes is back, still with Dr. Rachel Khan of the UP College of Mass Comm. Our hanging question, has the algorithm become the new editor?
Has it?
Yes, actually. It's now the gatekeeper. In this world of the digital news and everything, it is the new gatekeeper. There are times when, because everything that we see, especially if we're dependent on our news feed and we don't go organic, we don't go to the actual websites of the news, then what we see on our feeds is basically what our algorithm gives us. And that means what the internet sees as what interests us, what interests our friends, what is popular. So not necessarily what is most important. It becomes popularity.
Pero if it's the algorithm that people now rely on to show them what news they should be reading, shouldn't interest in news actually be increasing? Because the algorithm, more or less, is designed to give you what you want or what it thinks you are interested in. So shouldn't people be seeing news that actually appeals to their interest as determined by the algorithm?
It will appeal not only what it appeals to them, but what appeals to their friends, their network. So that's what they will see. Now, if you have a very partisan network, then you will only see one side of the story. You're not going to see the other side. So because it's not part of your algorithm.
It creates echo chambers.
So yan yung echo
It
chambers.
creates echo chambers, filter bubbles, without our realizing it. So we think we see a worldview, but actually we see a very small portion of it.
Is this a media problem or a societal one?
Both societal and media, because media has to find a way to break into those algorithms. And by having multiple platforms, they manage to expand that. But at the same time, a person can actually limit their own algorithm without their being aware by looking only at certain things or certain sources. Or, for example, you're deleting everybody on your news feed who doesn't agree with you. You're actually...
Ang tawag doon, pagbabawas stress.
Right? So, yeah.
true.
Yeah,
Even
but
me.
for example, during election period, your friend or acquaintance on Facebook did not agree with your political views. And then you say, unfriend. Okay? What you're actually doing is shrinking your algorithm. And therefore, what you see is even smaller of the portion of news out there, of information out there.
Global trust in news is at an all-time low at 37%, according to this study. So, do you think this is a reversible trend?
During the COVID, it actually picked up.
Yes.
If we look at, if I'm going to be theoretical about it, there's a theory called media dependency theory. When there is a crisis, people turn to official sources.
Because they need to know.
Because they need to know what's going on. And then the news, the interest in news peaks. So without a crisis of COVID proportions, then that wanes again. And that we're now, after peaking during the pandemic, we're now sliding back to, levels of uninterest, unfortunately.
Well, the war in Iran was, I think, not COVID proportions, but it certainly
But
made
unless
people
the
turn.
Philippines actually we feel it
Kasi
because
hindi
of the
tayo.
gas.
Yes.
But I don't think the minute details of the war interest the majority of the population. They just want to know if their gas is going up or down.
But isn't that an extremely alarming
It's very
trend?
alarming because
yeah.
that interest. And if you look at the global statistics, what is even worse is that Philippines is number one in the mistrust of mainstream media, of
And
news.
why do you think we are highest compared to other countries? What's so unique about our situation?
I think the previous administration was very effective in making us mistrust or making the majority or the population mistrust the news. And then it was not helped by the few bad eggs that are there that also showed bias in the way they reported. So, they were able to verify it because of these few examples, leaving the rest who are still struggling to do their job, at a quandary of how to regain this trust.
So now people are also relying on another source of news, AI. So what happens when people ask to summarize the news using AI instead of reading the original reports?
If AI becomes the gatekeeper, then we're even shrinking our news reach. Why? Because it's also based on algorithm. And it's also actually very biased because it's biased based on who programmed the AI.
I see.
So actually what we don't realize is AI is pre-programmed. Even if they are machine learning, they're still, the basis is their pre-programming of how they do a search of the internet and how they
So there are
phrase.
basic rules that they already follow.
Yes. And the thing is, they can exacerbate something that's wrong. For example, a management style became popular. they can, if you're asking about management advice from AI and this becomes popular, yung pala, it's not accurate or there are better ways. You're stuck on that because that's the one that's popular. It's not going to think out of the box. See, what people don't realize is they're putting themselves in a box because humans can think out of a box and AI cannot.
I recently used AI to look up very, very recent historical references, recent ones. And then I noticed that it had cited sources only from one particular point of view. So I put it in and I said, sorry, Barry, but these are primarily leftist sources. Sorry, I had to use the term leftist. I apologize. So, but apparently, Gemini agreed and said, yes, would you like us to? So you have to specifically ask for less, how do you call this?
Neutral sources.
For more
Less
neutral,
partisan.
less partisan sources. Because it will admit naman if they come from primarily viewed as left or right, even consequently rightist sources. So do you think people should be taught about these, and should newsrooms
I think it should
embrace AI as well?
That's part of our advocacy for media literacy, that people know how news operates and also how AI operates. Because if we continue that increasing reliance on AI, you're really going to get biased information because nga of the pre-programming. And then also if people are dependent on a certain partisan viewpoint and that becomes the popular choice, that's what AI is going to give you. Unless you, again, you
Then you
reprompt,
question
you put another prompt that clarifies it.
And I think it's going to be that trend will be accelerated, considering that the search engine of choice for many, Google,
Yes.
now
Google
has
built-in.
that's a built-in AI.
Yes.
Gemini.
And I think people should also be aware that there's such thing as AI hallucinations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means that they actually invent non-existent studies.
And they say it in
Even
such
cases.
a confident way.
Yes.
Even Supreme
Yes.
Court cases.
Yes.
I've caught ChatGPT doing that.
They do. So, I mean, people are not aware of that in general.
So, so how do you think that we should be training a newer generation? Is the academe the one going to bear most of the responsibility for this?
I've always thought that the academe should, because media literacy should actually be part of our curriculum from grade school. And I'm actually saddened that I learned only a few months ago that the Department of Education actually took out media literacy as a required course. Because before they had an elective in grades 11 and 12 of media literacy.
Yes.
They've removed it under the new curriculum, the DepEd curriculum. It no longer exists. It's now going to be repackaged under 21st century skills, which means it's just a portion of that. You know, they're gonna try to put in, it's like, that's why we don't know our history, because they put history under civica. So you have all sorts of other things.
Yes.
You know, and that's why they're in college and they don't know who. You know, I had a student before who put Andres Bonifacio with the Death March, right? I mean,
Wow, that's
really
like
that
pretty big gap.
right? And you know, now I'm not anymore surprised because you find out it's 1/4 in a whole year.
History, yes.
How do they absorb anything, right? So if they can do that to history and now they're doing it to media lit, we're in trouble.
So, given
no
yung
more art.
ganyang development, how do we actually go about teaching the younger generation to navigate this information space?
I think the teacher should learn how to put it within whatever course they're teaching, but that's a tall order, and they also need training. One of the things we do in the journalism department is precisely to have outreach on media literacy training, but it's not enough. No? So while it's a long-term solution, I hope government actually does something towards that end. Because
How?
that's
What
the long-term.
do you expect government to do?
To really put it back in the curriculum.
Okay.
One of the things, for example, like for us, Sweden is the best model. They put it from grade 1.
Actually,
So primary school.
Primary school.
They're
so
one of the
they're
best
trained
education
how to,
models.
Yes. So they're trained how to think, how to look at things critically, how to check sources at a very young age. So by the time they're college, they're very savvy already.
So, we're at the portion of our program where we ask tough questions. News organizations have set up their social media departments handling TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X. How to make these work? Because as we know, social media platforms have a tendency to go for short form. A lot less reading, a lot more videos. How do you think that we should encourage news media organizations?
I think they do have to expand to these short form platforms, if only to maintain the interest in news. As we saw in the Digital News Report, there is a 51% that rarely looks at news unless it's staring them in the face. So if there's more news content on these short form platforms, then we're also affecting the algorithm for people to get interested in the news, and hopefully that interest will lead them to the longer form. And that's really what the short form should be doing, is to get, to tease them, to let people, are you aware of this? So that they look at the long form, they look for context.
So Bilyonaryo does that. We have reels, and then we add the link to the longer article.
Yes.
So I think this is it's also a trend now among most of the media organizations.
Well, they have to be present in the spaces where people are.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Yes.
Next tough question, Prof. When a journalist looks at an underperforming piece of report, how do you diagnose if the problem lies on topic, angle, or choice of video and language? So this is more a substance versus form question.
I think both are important. In the short form, it becomes form than substance because you don't have enough time to give content. So it's mostly, it's like just putting out the lead, and that's it.
Yes.
So what you can do is actually have like part 1, part 2, part 3, which is what some TikTokers are doing.
Yes.
Right? So to put in more content. That's one way of going about it. Or as teasers so that they look at the news later at 6 or whatever. But yeah, what's happening now is entertainment is higher in value than something serious like the news.
But hasn't it always been like, even when we had newspapers and the TV news, the highest ratings or the most
still
read
entertainment,
were
because
always
of course
like,
people are always looking for escape.
Yes. Well, Ricky Lo used to be the most popular columnist in the Philippine Star, defeating all the political columnists.
True.
But
it's also something cultural, because we're not a reading public. It would be the statistics would be slightly different. For example, in Europe. In fact, Europe would be even higher in interest in news than America. We're actually a lot like the US in terms of putting entertainment first.
10 years from now, do you think 10 years from now, AI could replace, if they're not already doing it, replace news anchors, columnists, and even reporters? Do you see this coming?
In terms of the 5 W's and H, AI can. But in terms of, not all the 5 W's, the Y. I tell my students that journalists will continue to thrive if they're able to answer the why. Because the why is not something AI can dig up.
Okay.
Yes.
So actually, the next question is related to that point. What can legitimate news organizations do that AI and content creators can't?
For one thing, they can, if they're going to use AI, they use it to look at the big data, to go to the analysis. So instead of using AI replacing them of looking at the basic data, let's go one step beyond and look at the trends, look at why is this happening, because that's where that's where humans will have the advantage of understanding what is not plain to see, and digging deeper into, looking at the behind the scenes. Because you really have to do field work for that. So you can't send a robot to look for that information. And that's where we have to develop our skills.
This has been very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Khan.
We need more of these. Thank you, Dr. Khan. In the digital age, information is everywhere. What deserves our trust is the challenge.
Technology may change how we receive the news, but facts matter, and so does the search for the truth. I'm former VP spokesperson, Attorney Barry Gutierrez.
And I'm a former press secretary, Attorney Trixie Cruz-Angeles. And we are the Spokes.